Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. She rented a millionaire boyfriend for $2 only to realize he was the man she once broke. The soft hum of a coffee grinder filled the small cafe in downtown Seattle. Raindrops streaked across the window, turning the city lights into watercolor blurs. Behind the counter, Lila Tran tightened her ponytail and wiped down a table that had already been cleaned twice. The cafe was nearly empty, and so was her patience. Her phone buzzed a reminder of the overdue rent notice, and another message from her client threatening to cancel a design contract. She exhaled slowly, clutching the phone as if it could stop her world from unraveling. A new notification popped up. Need a +1 for a client gala? Rent a date safe, simple, and affordable. Her eyes paused on the price. $2 for 2 hours. It sounded ridiculous, desperate, maybe both, but desperation was the one thing she had in abundance. She tapped Book Now, filling the request form with trembling fingers. Under Preferred Type, she wrote, clean, polite, convincing enough to pass as my boyfriend. When she hit Confirm, she laughed under her breath. $2 for a fake boyfriend. What could really go wrong? That night, rain turned the streets silver. Lila stood outside the Orion Hotel, clutching her thrift store clutch and rehearsing her cover story. She needed to impress the new client, a luxury branding firm run by traditional investors who valued stable family image. A single woman like her had no chance unless she appeared taken. The deal was her last lifeline to keep her late mother's studio from closing. Her phone vibrated again. Your rent-a-date has arrived. Lila turned toward the entrance. For a heartbeat, everything stopped. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal suit that fit like it was carved for him, Ethan Cole, the man she had loved 3 years ago, the man she had left behind when her career came first. He walked toward her slowly, rain glistening on his shoulders, eyes unreadable yet familiar enough to make her heart twist. Lila, he said, voice low but steady, looks like I am your $2 boyfriend tonight. Oh, her breath caught. You? Ethan gave a faint smile, slipping his hands into his pockets. Small world, huh? Or maybe fate just has a sense of humor. The last time she had seen him, he was an ambitious architect with nothing but debt and dreams. Now, there was a quiet authority in his voice, a calm confidence she did not remember. This is a mistake, she whispered, taking a step back. Maybe, he said softly, but the app says you already paid. She froze. Around them, hotel guests passed in a blur of umbrellas and laughter, but all she could hear was the steady rhythm of her own heartbeat. Minutes later, they were seated in the warm glow of the hotel lobby, pretending to be a couple. Ethan handed her a napkin when she nearly spilled her drink. She muttered a quick, thank you, refusing to meet his eyes. So, he said casually, what exactly do I need to do tonight? Just look like you still love me, she said before she could stop herself. Ethan's brows lifted. Still? She swallowed hard. Forget it. Just follow my lead. His lips curved, but not in mockery, more like something in him softened for the first time that night. Deal, he murmured. And as the rain tapped against the glass and the gala lights flickered in the distance, Lila realized that pretending might be the most dangerous thing she had ever agreed to do. The next morning, the sound of rain had faded, but the air in Seattle still carried its chill. Lila woke to the gray light seeping through her curtains. The events of the previous night replayed in her mind like a dream she was not sure had actually happened. She had rented a boyfriend for $2, and the universe had sent her Ethan Cole, the one man she had promised herself she would never see again. Her phone buzzed. A message from her client flashed across the screen. Thank you for attending the gala. Let us discuss the proposal today at noon. Relief swept through her, followed quickly by anxiety. She had survived the first test, but it was not over. She had to look composed, successful, and most importantly, convincingly, taken. She glanced at the mirror, saw her tired eyes, and whispered, you can do this. Downstairs, she poured black coffee into a chipped mug and opened her laptop to prepare the design mock-ups. A notification pinged a new email with the subject line, from Ethan, Her pulse jumped. Lila, I assume last night went well. I am still under contract for another hour if you need help today. I can play the part until your meeting is done. EC. She hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. She should delete it. She should move on. But deep down, she knew showing up alone might destroy the illusion she had created. Fine, she typed. Meet me at noon at Harbor and Finch Cafe. Dress like you did last night. When she arrived at the cafe, the place buzzed with soft jazz and murmured conversations. She had barely found a seat when Ethan walked in. Daylight softened him. The sharp lines of his suit, the calm posture, the quiet authority, he looked more like a man who belonged in boardrooms than dating apps. $2 girlfriend, he greeted lightly, sliding into the seat across from her. Keep your voice down, she hissed, glancing around. This is my client's favorite place. In. Ethan smiled, folding his hands on the table. Relax. I am not here to ruin your plan. I am just curious. About what? About how someone like you ended up renting someone like me. She blinked, thrown by his honesty. Someone like me? He leaned slightly forward. You were always the one who said love had no price. I guess inflation changed that. Her chest tightened. You left, Ethan. I had no choice but to focus on work. He nodded slowly, as if measuring every word. You are right. I left because I thought you did not believe in us anymore. Before she could answer, her client entered the cafe, a polished woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a gold brooch. Lila straightened her posture instantly. Ethan followed her cue without missing a beat, placing his hand gently over hers. Miss Rowan, Lila said, standing to greet her. This is Ethan, my partner. He is also in creative design. Ethan extended a steady hand. Pleasure to meet you. Lila speaks very highly of your work. The woman's eyes softened just a little. Good to finally see the man she is always talking about. Lila's throat went dry. Ethan gave a calm, reassuring squeeze to her hand. For the next 20 minutes, they presented sketches, color palettes, and campaign ideas. Every time Lila stumbled, Ethan filled the silence smoothly. Every time she lost her train of thought, he guided her back with a look that steadied her heartbeat. When Miss Rowan finally stood, she said, I like what I see. You two make a convincing team both in business and in life. She smiled faintly and walked out. Lila sat back, breathless. You were unbelievable, Ethan shrugged. It is part of the job description. She stared at him for a long second, trying to read what lay beneath the professional charm. Why are you doing this, Ethan? It cannot just be about money. He smiled faintly. Maybe I wanted to see if you still needed me. Maybe I wanted to see if I still cared. Her pulse stuttered. Do you? He met her gaze without hesitation. I never stopped. Silence settled between them, heavy but not cold. Outside, the clouds began to thin, and sunlight spilled through the window, lighting his face in gold. Lila looked away first. We are done here. The deal went through, thanks to you. Glad to hear it, he said, rising from the table. Then I suppose our contract is officially over. He turned to leave, and her heart twisted at how easily he said it. But before he reached the door, she spoke quietly. Ethan, wait. He paused, glancing back. She hesitated, then said, The studio is reopening tomorrow. I could use help with the presentation boards. You still owe me an hour, remember? For a second, something warm flickered behind his calm expression. He nodded. Then I will see you tomorrow, Miss Tran. Oh. And as he stepped out into the afternoon light, Lila realized that somewhere between pretending and remembering, the lines of the contract were beginning to blur. The next day came with rare sunshine breaking through the Seattle clouds. Lila stood inside her small studio, sweeping dust off the old drafting table her mother once used. Rolls of sketches leaned against the walls, and the faint scent of paint and coffee filled the air. She had not invited anyone here since her mother passed away, but today felt different. Right on time, Ethan arrived, no suit, no pretense, just a gray shirt with sleeves rolled up, and that same calm confidence that always made her heart stumble. He paused at the doorway, looking around the modest space filled with sunlight. So this is where you disappeared after you left, he said quietly. Lila smiled faintly. It is not much, but it is mine. And he stepped closer, running his fingers along a wooden frame. It is honest. I like it. She gestured to a pile of boards stacked on the table. If you are really here to help, start with these. I need them ready before tomorrow's pitch. For the next few hours, they worked side by side. The rhythm was easy, familiar, almost peaceful. Ethan measured and cut the boards with precision, while Lila painted edges and arranged layouts. Every now and then, their hands brushed, and each touch carried the quiet tension of a story unfinished. "You still hum when you work," he said at one point, his voice soft. She glanced at him. "You still notice things you should not." He smiled without looking up. "That is how I remember you." The words hung in the air, tender and dangerous. Lila pretended not to hear, focusing on the next board, though her heart betrayed her with its pace. By late afternoon, the studio was alive again. Designs leaned against the wall like windows into her dreams, bright, bold, and full of hope. Ethan stood beside her, arms crossed, studying her work. "You always had a way of turning struggle into color," he said. Lila wiped paint from her fingers. "Struggle was all I had for a while." "Not anymore," he replied. "You just landed the biggest client of your career." She looked at him, seeing pride in his eyes, not pity. "You sound like you actually care." Ethan met her gaze, unflinching. "I do, maybe I never stopped." Her breath caught again, but she forced a small laugh. "Careful, that is not in the contract." He stepped closer, his tone steady but gentle. Maybe it should have been. For a moment, neither of them moved. The city noise outside faded, replaced by the soft ticking of the wall clock. Then Lila broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Ethan, I do not know if I can go back to what we were." "I am not asking you to," he said. "I just want to be where you are, even if it is just for now." Her eyes softened. She nodded once, turning back to her workbench. "Then hand me the glue gun, Mr. $2. He laughed quietly, passing it to her, and in that simple act, the walls she had built began to crack. When the evening light dimmed, they stood at the window watching the last rays fade over the skyline. Lila whispered, almost to herself, "It feels like the studio is breathing again." Ethan looked at her, voice low and certain. "Maybe it is not the studio. Maybe it is you." And as she met his eyes, she realized that for the first time in years, the ache of the past no longer hurt, it was slowly turning into something new. The morning of the pitch arrived crisp and bright. Lila barely slept. Her nerves buzzed beneath her calm exterior as she adjusted the collar of her navy blazer. On the table lay the boards she and Ethan had worked on through the night, each one perfect, every detail sharp. She poured herself a quick cup of coffee, trying to steady her shaking hands. When she stepped outside, Ethan was already there, waiting beside his car. He looked effortlessly composed, holding 2 paper cups. "I thought you might need caffeine more than courage," he said, handing one to her. Lila smiled weakly. "You are not wrong." They drove downtown in silence, the tension between them thick but not hostile. The city shimmered under the rare sun, glass towers reflecting streaks of gold. Ethan's fingers tapped lightly on the steering wheel, matching the rhythm of her heartbeat. At the conference room of Rowan and Hart Designs, the team gathered sleek suits, serious faces, the quiet hum of money and expectation. Lila took a deep breath and began. She spoke about renewal, about creating designs that reflected human connection, not just profit. Every word carried a piece of her struggle, her resilience. When she finished, the room fell silent. Then Miss Rowan smiled, slow and deliberate. "It is not often we see passion like that. Welcome to the partnership, Miss Tran." Applause filled the room. Lila's eyes widened, the tension breaking all at once. She turned instinctively toward Ethan. He gave her a proud nod, his smile small but genuine. Outside the building, sunlight spilled across the marble steps. Lila exhaled, almost laughing. "We did it." Ethan's gaze lingered on her face. "No, you did it." She shook her head. "We both know I would have fallen apart without you." He tilted his head slightly. "Then maybe I was exactly where I was supposed to be." The moment stretched, quiet and charged. Lila looked away first, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You can stop pretending now, the job is done." He hesitated, then said softly, "Pretending stopped feeling like pretending a long time ago." Her pulse jumped. "Ethan, do not." He stepped closer, his voice low. "Lila, I am not asking for anything. I just want you to know the truth. You were never easy to forget." The words landed heavier than she expected. She wanted to believe them, but part of her still feared how much she could lose if she let herself fall again. That night, back in her studio, the silence felt too large. The lights from the city flickered through the window as she stared at the sketches spread across the table. Her phone buzzed a message from Ethan. "Congratulations, partner. You earned every bit of it. Dinner tomorrow? My treat. No contracts this time." Lila stared at the screen for a long minute, her heart divided between sense and longing. Then she typed back, "One dinner, nothing more." The next evening, they met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the harbor. The waiter poured wine. The air smelled faintly of sea salt and jasmine. Conversation flowed easily at first. Work, travel, safe topics. But when the laughter softened, Ethan leaned forward. "Lila, I need to tell you something." Her fork paused midway. "What is it?" He looked down, almost hesitant. "I am not just a designer anymore. I run the firm now. The Orion Hotel gala you took me to, that was my client. I bought controlling shares last year." Lila's breath caught. "You? What?" "I did not tell you because I wanted you to see me as I was before all the things you once believed I could become." Her world tilted slightly. "You mean all this time, you—" "Yes," he said quietly. "You rented a Millionaire for $2, but you never needed my money. You only needed a chance." The truth settled between them, raw and real. Lila felt tears sting her eyes, not from betrayal, but from something deeper. For the first time, she understood that he had not returned to prove her wrong. He had come back to remind her that she was always enough. The night wind brushed across the harbor, carrying the faint hum of city lights. Lila sat in silence, staring at the man across the table, the man she once loved, the man she thought she knew. The truth had changed everything and yet explained everything at once. Ethan Cole, the struggling architect she left behind, was now a millionaire who had quietly built an empire while keeping her memory alive. Her fingers tightened around the wine glass. "So all this time, you could have told me," she said softly. Ethan nodded slowly. "I could have. But would you have believed me? You once said you did not need saving. I wanted you to see that you never did." She looked out the window, the reflection of city lights rippling on the dark water. "You think hiding who you are is honesty?" "No," he said. "But I did not want to win you with what I had. I wanted to remind you of what we were before the money, before ambition ruined everything." His words carried the weight of the years between them. Lila exhaled, her voice breaking slightly. "You should have given me the choice." "You are right," he said. "That was my mistake." For a moment, the air between them felt heavy with everything unsaid, the hurt, the pride, the memories. Then Ethan reached into his pocket and placed something on the table. It was the $2 bill, edges worn, folded neatly. "You gave this to me when you were struggling in college," he said quietly. "You told me one day it would be lucky money. I kept it all this time. When I saw your name on that app, I took it as a sign." Lila stared at the bill, her throat tightening. "That is why you took the job?" He nodded. "Because I needed to know if what we had still meant something. Not the past, not the success, just us." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. "And what if it does not?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Then at least I will know I tried." The silence that followed was not awkward, it was fragile, honest. For the first time, Lila saw him not as the man who left, nor the man who hid behind wealth, but as the same Ethan who once sketched dreams on napkins and believed in her before she believed in herself. When the waiter brought the check, she reached for it, but Ethan placed his hand over hers. "This one is on me," he said softly. She looked at him for a long moment, then smiled through the blur of her tears. "Fine, but next time, it is my turn." He laughed quietly, a sound that felt like the first crack of dawn after a long night. "So there will be a next time?" Lila hesitated, then whispered, "Maybe." They left the restaurant and walked along the boardwalk. The lights reflected off the calm water, and the faint music from a nearby street performer drifted through the air. Lila wrapped her coat tighter, and Ethan offered his arm. For once, she did not resist. "Lila," he said gently, "I know I cannot change what happened before, but I can be better now. No contracts, no pretending, just truth." She looked up at him, her voice trembling but clear. "You already are better. Maybe we both are." "Ugh." They stopped near the railing, watching the waves roll in and out like slow heartbeats. Ethan turned to her, his eyes steady. "For what it is worth," he said, "those $2 were the best investment I ever made." Lila smiled through a tear. "And maybe the best mistake I ever did." The city glowed behind them, the future stretching wide and unwritten. And for the first time in a long time, she did not feel like she was pretending anymore. A few days later, Lila stood inside her studio again, sunlight spilling through the tall windows. The new partnership with Rowan and Hart Designs had begun, and for the first time in years, the studio buzzed with life. Assistants moved around, mood boards lined the walls, and the faint scent of fresh coffee mixed with acrylic paint. Yet even in the noise, a quiet thought followed her, Ethan. Since that night at the harbor, they had not spoken much. A few polite texts, a shared smile when their paths crossed at meetings, but nothing more. Lila tried to bury herself in work, convincing herself that distance was safer. But every time her phone lit up, she secretly hoped it would be him. That afternoon, her assistant knocked on the glass door. "There is someone here to see you." Lila turned and froze. Ethan stood there, dressed in a dark coat, his hair slightly tousled from the wind. He held a small envelope in his hand. "I hope I am not interrupting," he said softly. She forced a professional smile. "You are always interrupting. What brings you here?" He stepped closer, holding out the envelope. An invitation. She hesitated before taking it. Inside was a sleek black card embossed in silver letters. Carter Foundation Annual Gala, honoring creative leadership. Lila blinked. "This is your event." He nodded. "Yes, and I would like you to come. Not as my date, as my guest of honor." Her lips parted. "Guest of honor? Why me?" Ethan met her eyes. "Because the campaign you designed for Rowan and Hart saved their brand and inspired the foundation to fund independent creators. I wanted to acknowledge that." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. "You do not have to do this." "I know," he said, "but I want to." For a moment, neither spoke. The air between them felt charged again, soft, uncertain, real. Finally, she nodded. "All right, I will come." The night of the gala arrived, draped in elegance. The ballroom shimmered with crystal chandeliers and soft music. Lila wore a simple ivory gown, her hair pinned loosely at the nape of her neck. As she entered, a murmur spread through the crowd. Ethan turned from a group of investors and froze when he saw her. "You look incredible," he said quietly when she reached him. "Thank you," she replied. "You clean up nicely yourself." He chuckled. "Old habits." Ugh. As the speeches began, Lila sat near the front, her heart steady but her mind restless. When Ethan stepped onto the stage, the room fell silent. He spoke of innovation, kindness, and second chances. Then, as the final slide appeared on the screen, her breath caught. It was a photograph of her studio, her sketches, her team, her name. "Tonight," Ethan said, his voice clear, "we honor Lila Tran, a designer who reminded us that creativity is not about perfection, it is about courage." Oh. Applause erupted. Lila felt her chest tighten, emotion flooding through her. When she met his gaze from across the room, he smiled, not as a CEO, not as a millionaire, but as the man who once believed in her when no one else did. After the ceremony, he found her near the balcony overlooking the city. "You should be proud," he said. She turned to him, eyes glimmering. "I am, but it feels like too much." He shook his head. "It is not enough. You gave me a reason to believe in something real again." The city lights flickered below them. For a moment, they stood in silence, two souls who had already said everything but still had more to feel. And as the music swelled behind them, Lila realized that fate was not giving them another contract. It was giving them a choice. The following week unfolded like a blur of headlines and whispers. The Carter Foundation Gala had been a success, but fame came with shadows. A gossip column titled, "Designers Overnight Rise, a Romance or a Setup," appeared online, questioning whether Lila's recognition had been earned or gifted through Ethan's influence. By morning, her inbox was flooded with messages. Some congratulated her, others carried thinly veiled accusations. The weight of every word pressed against her chest. She shut her laptop and buried her face in her hands. "It is happening again," she whispered. "People think I did not deserve this." Huh? The studio door opened quietly. Ethan stepped in, holding a newspaper folded under his arm. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the same frustration she felt. "You saw it," he said. She looked up, her voice trembling. "They are saying I used you." He set the paper down. "Let them talk. You earned every bit of what you have." "Easy for you to say," she snapped. "You are the millionaire. You can afford to ignore them. I have to live in this world every day. Her words cut through the silence, sharp and exhausted. Ethan did not argue. He simply walked to the window and stared at the rain that had begun to fall again. You think I do not care what people say? I have been judged for every choice I ever made. The difference is, I stopped letting them define what is true. Lila sighed, pacing across the room. I did not ask you to stand up for me. I know, he said, but I am going to anyway. He turned to her then, his voice firmer. I am holding a press conference this afternoon. I will make it clear that the award was my decision and mine alone. Her eyes widened. No, Ethan. That will only make it worse. They will think you are protecting me because I love you, he finished quietly. The room went still. She froze, unable to breathe. Do not say that, she whispered. It is the truth, he said simply. It has always been the truth. Lila's throat tightened. You cannot fix this with feelings. This is my career. I am not trying to fix it, he replied. I am trying to tell the world that you are not a story I wrote. You are the story that changed me. The sincerity in his words cracked something inside her. For a moment, she wanted to believe him, to let the warmth in his eyes erase every doubt. But pride held her still. I need to handle this my way, she said. He nodded slowly, pain flickering behind his calm expression. Then I will trust you too. He left without another word, the soft echo of his footsteps fading down the hallway. Lila stood alone, staring at the sketches on the wall. Each line, each color, carried her history, the nights she had worked through exhaustion, the mornings she had refused to give up. Later that evening, she sat in front of her camera and opened a live stream. Her voice was steady, her expression unshaken. There has been a lot of talk about how I got here, she said. But success is not borrowed. It is built. And no matter who stands beside me, I will keep building. When she ended the stream, messages of support began to pour in. Artists, students, small business owners, people who saw themselves in her story. And somewhere in that moment, she realized that what Ethan had said was true. They could twist her narrative, but they could not steal her truth. 2 days later, the rain gave way to clear skies, but Lila felt a storm still brewing inside her. The live stream had gone viral, millions of views, endless comments. Most were supportive, calling her brave and authentic, yet a few still doubted, still whispered that she owed everything to Ethan Cole. She had not heard from him since that tense conversation in her studio. The silence between them had stretched into something heavy and uncertain. But deep down, she knew Ethan was not the type to disappear when things got difficult. That afternoon, while reviewing sketches at her desk, her assistant rushed in. Lila, you need to see this, she said breathlessly, holding her phone. On the screen, a video of a press conference played. Ethan stood behind a podium with the Carter Foundation logo shimmering on the backdrop. Cameras flashed as reporters called his name. I am here to address the rumors surrounding the recent gala, Ethan said clearly. The recognition given to Lila Tran was based solely on her work and her contribution to the creative community. She earned every bit of it. The truth is, she did not use me. I used her story as a reminder that integrity still matters in this world. The room fell silent in the video. Ethan continued, his tone firm but warm. She was my student once, my partner once, and she remains the reason I believe in second chances. I stand by her, not out of pity or love alone, but out of respect. Lila's heart pounded as the video ended. Her assistant grinned. He just turned the whole narrative around. Everyone online is calling him the definition of class. But Lila was not smiling. Her eyes shimmered with something deeper, gratitude and regret all at once. Without saying a word, she grabbed her coat and left the studio. By the time she reached the Carter Foundation headquarters, the press conference had ended. The lobby was nearly empty, except for a few lingering journalists packing up their gear. She spotted Ethan near the exit, speaking quietly with a staff member. Ethan! She called. He turned, surprise flickering across his face before softening into relief. You saw it, he said. I did, she replied, walking closer. You should not have done that. He smiled faintly. You are welcome. She shook her head. You took all the attention onto yourself. You know what that means? Now they will write about you instead. Good, he said simply. Maybe that will give you some peace. Lila stared at him, searching his face for any hint of pride or performance, but there was none, just quiet sincerity. Why do you always do this? She asked, her voice trembling. You saved me when I never asked you to. He looked at her for a long moment. Because you never needed saving, Lila. You just needed someone who would not walk away this time. The words hit her harder than she expected. Before she could respond, a reporter approached with a microphone, interrupting the fragile moment. Mr. Cole, one question. Are you confirming your relationship with Miss Tran? Ethan's eyes did not waver. He glanced at Lila, then back at the reporter. Our relationship is built on trust and respect. Whatever label you give it, that is all that matters. The reporter nodded, satisfied, and left. Lila looked at him, speechless. You could have denied everything, she whispered. I could have, he said. But the truth deserves a voice. For the first time in years, she felt the ground steady beneath her feet, not because Ethan defended her, but because he believed in her enough to stand beside her without hiding. As they stepped outside, sunlight caught the edges of the glass towers, scattering light like pieces of a broken promise finally mended. Lila smiled faintly. So what happens now? Ethan glanced at her, his voice gentle. Now, we stop pretending. And as they walked toward the waiting crowd, their hands brushed just once. Brief, but certain, like the beginning of something real. A month later, spring had arrived in Seattle. The air carried the soft scent of rain and cherry blossoms, and Lila's studio glowed with morning light. The walls were no longer bare. They were filled with sketches, framed photographs, and letters from young artists who had written to thank her after her public statement. The once quiet space had become a symbol of renewal not just for her, but for everyone who believed that integrity could still lead to success. A gentle knock sounded at the door. She turned, already smiling. You are early, she said. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, holding 2 cups of coffee and a familiar worn envelope. Traffic was kind to me, he said with that easy calm she had learned to love again. He placed the envelope on her desk. Inside was the $2 bill, now framed between glass, the paper yellowed but intact. At the bottom was a small brass plaque that read, "Worth more than $2. Lila blinked back a tear. You kept it all this time, she whispered. I did, he said softly, but I think it belongs here now where everything began. She touched the frame, tracing the edges with her fingertips. You turned a mistake into a promise, she said quietly. Ethan smiled. Maybe it was never a mistake. Maybe it was just the beginning of us finding our way back. The room filled with sunlight, and for the first time, Lila allowed herself to believe it. Not as a fantasy or an apology, but as something real, something earned. A few hours later, the studio team gathered for a small celebration. Music played softly as laughter filled the air. Reporters called it a creative comeback, but to Lila, it was simply life returning to color. Ethan stayed close, helping her arrange portfolios and greet guests. At one point, he leaned toward her and said quietly, You know, I never really thanked you. For what? She asked. For letting me be a part of your story again. She smiled, her voice tender. You never stopped being part of it. You were just on another page. As the evening faded into golden light, the last guests left, and the studio grew quiet again. Ethan walked to the center of the room, his expression thoughtful. Lila, he said, his tone serious now. There is one last thing I need to do. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. When he opened it, the ring glimmered under the light, simple, elegant, timeless. Lila froze. Ethan. He stepped closer, voice steady. No contracts this time, no pretending, just a promise between equals. Will you marry me? Tears welled in her eyes as she let out a trembling laugh. You really do not know how to quit, do you? He smiled. Not when it comes to you. She looked at him for a long, quiet moment, and then nodded. Yes. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, his hands warm and sure. Around them, the light from the windows caught the framed $2 bill on the wall, glowing softly like a memory reborn. Lila whispered, half laughing, half crying, Best $2 I ever spent. Ethan's eyes met hers, his voice low, and the best decision I ever made. Outside, the city shimmered under the evening sky, no scandals, no contracts, just truth. For the first time in years, Lila did not feel like she was surviving. She was living, and beside her stood the man who had turned a rented moment into a lifelong promise.